welcome back. So now we're going to stay with our PISA data, and we're going to explore a little bit the non-numeric variables or the categorical variables. So remember, sometimes categorical variables are actually coded in numbers, but they don't measure numeric things. The most important one for us is right here in Tableau. Categorical variables are called dimensions. So you'll find the categorical variables you're interested up here. And just a little tip, if you're working with Tableau and it sometimes thinks that a variable is a measure or a numeric variable when it really is a dimension. Gender is a great example of that because it's coded as ones and twos. So Tableau thinks that it's a numeric variable and it'll import gender down here. But we mostly do not want to use gender as number 1 and number 2 as a numeric because you can't really add up 1 for female plus 2 for male equals 3, or the average of all the females and males will not have numeric meaning. So all you have to do is drag it up here to the dimensions and then drag it over onto your Tableau workbook. And you can see that we have females and males. And in working with categorical variables, what we usually want to do is know how many we have in our let's make a nice bar chart from Tableau. And you can see that our sample is nicely balanced. So there are just a few more females than males, but not many, and that's great. That's not surprising. This is a scientifically collected, stratified sample, so we would expect there to be similar numbers of males and females. So that is one way to take a quick look at a categorical variable. Just look at the number that you have in each. So I'm just going to clear the sheet so we can keep looking. Another thing we're going to look at, because it's the topic of our interest, is immigration. So this is a great example. You remember when we were looking at gender, it had the words male and the words female. So the data in the variable gender was actually a string. So it was a word. A string is kind of a computer science term for a word. So immigration is a categorical variable. These numbers 1, 2, 3, 8, and 9 aren't actually counting anything, but instead they are codes that stand for different categories. And in Tableau, we can edit the aliases and change those numbers into things that have meaning for humans. So we spend a lot of time doing this. If we're going to be working with a categorical variable, we spend a lot of time trying to get the numbers to have meanings to humans, so our visualizations are easier to understand, both for ourselves and for our audiences and for people who are working with us. We do a lot of pre-collaborative work before we ever publish a data story. So let's go in here and say 1 stands for a native-born student, so a student that was born in the country that the test is being administered in. 2 stands for a second generation immigrant, and 3 stands for a first generation immigrant. And the 8 and 9 are missing. So we can always right click on any categorical variable we want in Tableau and simply exclude the values that we don't want, which is very useful. In this case, I'm able to remove the missing or not applicable, but other times you might just want to look at the males or just at the females, so you can easily, just with a click of a button, exclude them. So again, with categorical variables, one of the things we want to look at is the relative distribution within our data set, within our sample. And you can see we have many, many more native-born students than immigrant students, but there's still quite a healthy number. And again, what we learned when we were writing our data biography is that this data was collected to be representative. And so if we use the data correctly, it will still be representative in most cases of the immigrant experience. We need to use it with a little bit of care, though, when we see how many more native-born students there are than first or second generation. So this is us looking at, let's go and clear this sheet. So that's how you get started looking at your categorical variables. Let's look at the relationship between two categorical variables. So let's see, here's one that we want to look at. How many people, this is called home language. So how many people are primarily speaking the language of the test at home? So I'm going to go and exclude the missing variables again. And you can always just drag things over in Tableau. It's very drag and drop. So this categorical variable tells us how many students primarily at home speak the language of the test, and how many students at home primarily speak a language that's different than the language of the test. I think this is going to be interesting in our analysis because the language spoken at home probably will have an effect on how you do on the test, whether you have to translate or you might have to struggle with the language. So let's look at how the language of the test relates to a person's immigration status. So we'll use the handy dandy Tableau Show Me, which isn't going to give us a really good choice right now. Let's show here. There we go. So let's use a simple bar chart because this is just quick and dirty. And somehow it brought back the number 9, so we're just going to quickly exclude that. So this is the kind of thing that I'm doing on a regular basis when I'm just getting to know my data. Again, you just drag and drop things in Tableau to make them the size and the shape that you're most comfortable looking at. This is called exploratory data analysis. You're not doing formal statistical analysis. You're not testing for statistical significance. All we're doing is getting to know what the patterns in our data are. So we're looking for kind of the beginning threads of stories, just the early days of the relationship. Think of this as the dating period. And so now we can see that there are both native-born and first and second generation immigrant students that speak primarily the language of the test at home. And there are both native-born and second and first generation immigrants that primarily speak not the language of the test at home. So that's really interesting to know. There are people who are native-born in the country where the test is administered, but are not primarily speaking the language of the test at home. That's a good assumption to check. So one of the things that Tableau can do is show us the percentages. So all I did was just click on the Show Me. I just want a stacked bar chart. I know there's a lot of controversy about whether a stacked bar chart is good or not good. Again, we're not creating visuals right now for presentation to an audience. We're just doing whatever works for us to understand the data we're working with. So I'm going to change the Analysis tab here to be % of. So this is going to calculate automatically for me. Instead of counting the number of records, I want to know what percentage each of these are of the column. So now I have a stacked bar chart that shows me something called shares. So I can now see what share of native-born students right here primarily speak the language of the test at home, which is this blue bar, and what proportions primarily speak a different language at home. And so you can see for native-born students, about 9% don't speak the primary language of the test at home. For second-generation immigrants, it's 33%, and for first-generation immigrants, it's over half. So this is a very important trend. Anything that we're going to be using in our story to talk about how immigrant students are doing in their schools needs to take into account what language they're speaking. Because I'm pretty sure when we get to the section where we're looking at how numeric variables affect non-numeric variables, we're going to find that the language spoken at home is related to their performance on the test. I don't know that yet. We're going to look at that in the next video.